This is the video that is about to go out to the entire world. Watch this right now.
Warning: the following World Dhamma Foundation presentation contains unauthorized ideas. If you are known to experience allergic reactions when exposed to ideas outside the box, we ask that you consult your spiritual advisor before and after viewing this presentation. The most common side effects may include increased heart rate, sweating, or difficulty breathing. These side effects usually go away quickly, but may reappear at different times throughout the presentation. If you are uncertain about your ability to think outside the box, World Dhamma Foundation asks that you stop viewing this presentation now.
Peace and blessings. This is Brother Rock, and welcome to Get On Board the Wheel. Today, I'm here with Paul Guthrie with the World Dhamma Foundation. It's always good to see you, Paul.
Thank you, Rock.
Today, in episode 1, we'll be discussing the question, did Master Fard Muhammad come from Arabia or did he come from India? Paul, I just want to start by giving a brief background. 5 years ago, in 2008, you posted a number of videos and you talked about how W.D. Farrar's teachings regarding the wheel refers to the Dhamma, or what is commonly referred to as Buddhism. You pointed out that just as the cross is associated with Christianity and the star and crescent is associated with Islam, the wheel is the universally accepted symbol of Buddhism. In those earlier videos, you talked about how the teachings are in fact Buddhist teachings and that W.D. Farrar came from India. How would you characterize the response, the public response, to the ideas that you were sharing?
Yes, we published those videos in January of 2008. After we had posted them, a lot of people expressed an interest in learning more about the topics we were talking about. And I had promised in those videos that at some point in the future, we'd be making a series, a video series, where we would be able to go deeper into those topics and to discuss in greater depth just what we were talking about. That's how this present series came about. It's just a follow-up on a promise we had made in those videos.
You said a number of people expressed interest in learning more. But those videos stayed up only for about 3 months, and then you took them down. Now, did you get any responses which were other than positive? I mean, are you aware of anyone arguing against the facts that you were sharing?
No, I'm not aware of anyone presenting any arguments or any kind of evidence arguing against what we were saying. And we took those videos down at a time that they were going viral. The feedback, all of the direct feedback was very positive. We heard from a lot of different people. They were all saying that they wanted to learn more about those topics. But we took them down when they had accomplished the purpose for which we had intended them. We just wanted to share a different perspective, a different view. We wanted to help show that there are other dimensions to the teachings of W.D. Farrar, which are worth considering. We wanted to look beyond Islam and beyond Saudi Arabia and to show W.D. Farrar's connection with India and to demonstrate that an understanding of Buddhism is in fact integral to understanding what he taught.
It was 4 videos altogether, right?
Right. There was a 5th video, but we only kept that posted for about 2 or 3 weeks.
Well, you know there were some people that opposed your view.
Well, I'm sure there were, but there's always going to be people of different views, different points of view, and that's okay.
A well-known Muslim academic attacked what you were saying.
I don't know that to be true.
Well, you do know after your video started spreading, he called what you were saying, I quote, totally unfounded and wrong.
Yeah, but that's not really an attack. It's just a claim. An attack would be if someone had presented evidence demonstrating what we were saying was not true.
Well, that academic gave a series of seminars which he advertised as being designed in part to disprove the ideas expressed in your videos, that there was a connection between Master Fard Muhammad and India in the connection of his teachings to Buddhism.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any facts anyone may have presented. I know about those seminars, but I can't respond to any of the arguments or anything that was claimed at those seminars because I wasn't invited. Hopefully today we'll be able to demonstrate very clearly for those who are open that W.D. Farad came from India. And in part 2, we'll show that he taught Buddhism.
And you know that now the same academic who just a few years ago was holding seminars and calling your views totally unfounded and wrong is now talking about India and how the teachings are connected to India and Buddhism.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I think it's progress.
He even posted an article on his site titled, "We Need Some Buddhism in Our Islam." And in that article, he's now admitting that, quote, Buddhism is an important part of the puzzle. When 5 years ago, he was holding seminars and claiming your views were totally unfounded and wrong. Isn't that flip-flopping? I mean, you don't just boo somebody and then turn around and copy their lyrics.
Well, different people live by different rules. I know that there are things that I have said and done in the past that I would not say and do today, and I think that's probably true of everyone.
I know that's right. Well, let's go ahead and get down to business.
Yes, I'd like to do that. I promise that I would, and right now is a good time to do it. In part 1, today is part 1. We're going to do a 4-part series so we can lay out fully what we want to share. In part 1, I want to talk about W.D. Farad came from India. In part 2, we can talk about and show that he taught Buddhism. In part 3 and part 4, we have some other interesting issues for those parts. So in part 1, let's just look at the issue of, did W.D. Farad come from India?
Okay, so the issue for this episode is, did Master Fard Muhammad come from India?
Yes.
So let's go ahead and talk about that. I just wanted to explain some of the history of your earlier videos before you started talking. I wanted to make sure that we point out a few things first, and we can add that at the beginning so that people will know something about the background. So first, let's talk about how Master Fard Muhammad came from India.
That's fine.
All right, so let's start now.
Okay, anyone who has the Supreme Wisdom Lesson Book, if you read it, you'll see that W.D. Farad never says he came from Mecca, Arabia. And all of the facts show that he came from India. When I say India, understand that over the course of time, borders change, they shift. So by India, I'm talking about India as it existed during the time of W.D. Farad's birth in 1877 and during the time of his teaching in the 1930s. India back then was called British India, and British India includes the region which today we call Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and Bangladesh, and India, and Burma. It was all one swath of land extending from Pakistan in the west to Burma in the east. That entire subcontinent was under the rule of the British at that time, and it was called British India. I'm going to be talking a lot about that part of India, the western part of India, which now includes India and Pakistan. That's the area that I'll be talking about.
Okay, what's the first thing about Master Fard Muhammad coming from India?
Okay, the first thing is his name. His name shows that he came from India, so let's start with his name. W.D. Farad most often referred to himself as W.D. Farad. There's no record that he ever even used or ever even heard the name Master Fard Muhammad. That name or title was given to him only after he had left. So in the lessons, he calls himself Mr. W.D. Farad. He does that over 20 times. If you look at his letters, handwritten letters, he always signs his name, Mr. W.D. Farad. There's only one single example in English lesson number C1 where he wrote W.F. Muhammad. So I'll be calling him by that name that he most often used, which is W.D. Farad. W.D. Farad stands for Wallace D. Farad.
So how does the name Wallace Farad point to India?
Okay, everyone knows that the name Wallace is not an Arabic name. Wallace is a British name. In fact, Wallace, that name being British, carries some significance because the British never ruled in Mecca or any part of Saudi Arabia. And back in 1877, at the time of his birth, things were a little bit different than they are now. Back then, people didn't just pick any name, like a foreign sounding name, for example. Back then, your name always reflected your culture. Your name reflected your history. It reflected where you were from. And because the British never ruled in Saudi Arabia, British names were simply just not used in Saudi Arabia among people born there, especially if they're born in the city of Mecca. At that time, English lessons, as in the term English lesson number C1, and British names were very popularly used in India. So while the name Wallace is not consistent with someone born in Arabia, it is very consistent with someone born in India. That is the first point. By the way, I mentioned English lesson number C1. The messenger said that name, English lesson number C1, was so named because it had to do with the British educational system. And that's interesting because at the time of W.D. Farad's birth, India was going through what's called Indianization. Indianization was the period during which the British made the British educational system and such things as English lessons a required part of primary school education in India. So again, the first point is, if a man has a British name and he writes a lesson which has something to do with the British educational system, that fits in perfectly with India. It doesn't fit in at all with Saudi Arabia. When we look at his last name, however, things start getting a little bit more interesting. If you look at the name Farad, research it, you'll discover that no one in the Arabic-speaking world uses Farid or Farad as a name. The word in that language, Arabic, Farid means obligatory, and Farid is a name. It is a word, rather. It's not a personal name. But the Arabic word Farid and the name Farad are not the same. In the Arabic, the word Farid, the second syllable, you'll notice, is very low. You can barely hear it. It's almost like it's just one syllable. On the other hand, the messenger and everyone else who studied directly under W.D. Farad and who actually heard him pronounce his own name, they say his name is pronounced Farad, not Farid. If you listen you can hear two sounds, Farad. There's two syllables in that name, Farad. In fact, the second syllable is louder than the first syllable. That is the complete opposite of the Arabic word Farid. What I'm saying is that the name Farad is not an Arabic name. Back in 1938, a sociologist named Erdman Beynon had published an article in the American Journal of Sociology. And back in the 30s, he quotes the students, early students in the 30s, as spelling his name F-A-R-R-A-D, the same way it's pronounced, Farad, F-A-R-R-A-D. And even as late as the 1960s, the papers spelled his name F-A-R-R-A-D, the same way it's pronounced. One of the messenger's brothers, John Muhammad, who also met with W.D. Farad, he named his son Farad, and he too spells that name F-A-R-R-A-D, exactly how it's pronounced. The name Farad is an Urdu name. Urdu is one of the languages of India. And the name Farad was first used in India during the time of the Sassanid rule. The Sassanids never ruled in Arabia. As a result, that name Farad has never been associated in Arabia or with that part of the world, Arabia. That name comes from India. So W.D. Farad's first name is British and his last name is Indian. That means that his name is not consistent with someone born in Mecca, Arabia, but it's perfectly consistent with someone born in India. Research that. Go back to the 1930s and try to find someone with a British name, a British first name, and an Indian last name. Everyone you'll find you will see that they come from India. So if he came from Arabia, why does he have an Indian name?
So you're saying that his first name Wallace is British and his last name Farad is Indian?
Yes.
It's not Arabic?
That's correct.
It's true in the problem book he calls himself W.D. Farad. He also mentions other people in the problem book as well. Aren't those names Arabic?
Let's look at the names that he mentions in the problem book. It said that a few years before W.D. Farad's birth, a conference was held in the Root of Civilization, and in the Supreme Wisdom Lesson book, in the problem book, it mentions that conference in problem number 32. W.D. Farad writes, one of the conference members by the name of Mr. Usman Sharif. Usman, spelled O-S-M-A-N, is again not an Arabic name. Again, it's a Urdu name from India. Usman is the Urdu, or the Indian way of saying the Arabic name Uthman. It's a completely different name. Uthman is Arabic. Usman is not Arabic. It comes from Urdu, India. Again, you can look it up online. O-S-M-A-N is an Urdu name. It also came during the time of the Sassanid rule in India. So just look it up exactly how it's spelled in the problem book and you'll see that it's a name from India. There's even a number of towns named Usman, and all of those towns are located in India. There's Usmanabad, there's Usmania University, there's Usmanagar. These are all in India. So in the 1930s, there was a man named Usman Ali Khan. He was he lived there in India. He was very rich, the richest man in the world at that time. Usman Ali Khan had that same name. He came from India. So when W.D. Farad mentions Usman Sharif, he's talking about someone from India. The point is that of the 12 leaders who met in the Root of Civilization, the only person who W.D. Farad says anything about is a man named Usman, a man with an Indian name. If W.D. Farad is from Arabia, why would he spell Usman Sharif's name using its Indian spelling?
So you're saying that Usman is Indian.
That's right.
And the other names in the problem book, are they Arabic or Indian?
Okay, at another point in the problem book, in problem number 8, W.D. Farad mentions a Mr. D.W. Shah. And just like the name Farad, and just like the name Usman, Shah is not an Arabic name. Shah is an Indian name. And the name Shah, it too comes from the Sassanids, when they ruled there in that part of the world, India. You've heard of the Shah of Iran, for example, right?
Yeah.
Well, Iran used to be called Persia. And the Persians, like I said before, during the Sassanid rule, they ruled West India. So a lot of their names, those names, Persian names, entered into the vocabulary of that part of the world, India, in the language of Urdu. And that's how the name Shah became popular in India. The Persians never ruled in Saudi Arabia. So those names are not associated with Saudi Arabia. So in the problem book, W.D. Farad speaks of Mr. Shah, Mr. D.W. Shah. Again, he's talking about someone with an Indian name.
So the name D.W. Shah in the problem book is from India. Is that where the name, the tribe of Shabazz, comes from, Shabazz?
Well, once again, that name Shabazz is not Arabic. No one in the Arabic-speaking world is named Shabazz. But W.D. Farad referred to those here in this country as lost members of the tribe of Shabazz. Shabazz was and still is a common name in India, in that part of India, western part of India. And just like the name Usman, there's even towns there named Shabazz, right there in India. It's a popular family name, for example. So there is a family, a clan or tribe called the tribe of Shabazz, right in India. No one else uses that name except India. So when W.D. Farad speaks of the tribe of Shabazz, that's a name from India. All of the names, including his own, shows that he came from India.
Okay, so can you give us a recap on what you've said so far?
All of the names mentioned, W.D. Farad mentions names. All the names he mentions, and which we've talked about so far, are all spelled and pronounced exactly as they are spelled and pronounced only in India. Those names are not Arabic, they are Urdu. They're from India. We talked about the name Usman. We talked about Wallace Farad. We talked about Mr. D.W. Shah. We talked about the name Shabazz. And these names are all Indian names. So regarding those names, which W.D. Farad himself wrote into those lessons, the facts show that they are Indian names.
When W.D. Farad gave his students holy names, aren't those names Arabic?
Well, some of the names he gave out include those names Usman, Shah, and Shabazz. And like I said, those are Indian names. Some of the other names he gave out are both Urdu and Arabic, such as Khalat and Kareem, for example. But some of those names, Khalat, for example, is the name of a princely state in India. So the names which W.D. Farad gave out, none of those names are strictly Arabic, but all of those names are Urdu. That means they all come from India. Even later, some of the names that the messenger gave out are Indian names. For example, those names ending with Khan are not Arabic names. When you see a name ending with Khan, remember how we talked about earlier, Usman Ali Khan? The name Khan comes from the the Chinese, Mongols. And the Mongols conquered the Persians in the 13th century. So the Chinese name Khan was adopted into the Persians, who again during the Sassanid rule introduced that name into Urdu in that part of India. And so those names ending with Khan are not Arabic. Modernly, those names ending with Khan are associated with India. In India, that name is added to the end of the name. Arabic names do not end with Khan. You can research it and just look it up. Khan, it's K-H-A-N. Most sources even point out that if Khan is added at the end of a name, it means an important person from India. So, for example, the name Farrakhan ends with Khan, just like Usman Ali Khan ends with Khan. And the name Farrakhan does not appear in the Arabic dictionary, lexicon rather. The closest name in Arabic is the name Farouk. And then there is a word, it's pronounced Furqan. That's the Arabic. That is Farouk or Furqan. Those are Arabic names, and they only have 2 syllables. But the name Farrakhan has 3 syllables, and it ends with Khan. It's been said that the messenger had never told anyone what that name means. That's proof that it's not Arabic. If it were Arabic, you'd be able to look it up in the dictionary. But the messenger didn't just invent that. He had to have received it from some source, and the source that he got it from was W.D. Farad. In India, Urdu, there's the name Farak, and it means auspicious. Auspicious means future success is likely. It's an Urdu name. It's from India. And the Khan ending, Farrakhan, that proves that it's an Indian name. So while there is no one in the Arabic-speaking world named Farrakhan, many thousands of people in India have that name, Farrakhan. You can look up, for example, there's a man named Farrakhan Patafi. He's a Pakistani writer. He's world famous. And there's many others. So none of the names which W.D. Farad gave out are strictly Arabic. But all of the names he gave out are Indian.
So did W.D. Farad give out any Arabic names?
You mean names which are Arabic and are not Urdu?
Yeah.
No. The only Arabic names he gave out are the Indian way of pronouncing those names, like the name Chalar, for example, C-H-A-L-L-A-R. That's an Indian name. And then there's Ugan Ali. Ugan is an Indian name. All the names are only traceable to India. You can take the name Ghulam Muhammad.
What?
Ghulam Muhammad was one of the names that the messenger used. And there's a group that is located in India, in that part of India that the name Farad comes from, and the name Shabazz comes from, and the name Usman comes from, and all the other names come from. And that group that I'm talking about is called the Ahmadiyya. The Ahmadiyya movement was founded in the west part of India by a man named Ghulam Ahmad. Ghulam Ahmad, he taught that he was the long-awaited Mahdi of the Muslims and the Christ or the Messiah of the Christian world. He said he was the one who the world had been expecting for the past 2,000 years. This man, Ghulam Ahmad, he taught that the Dajjal spoken of in the Hadith and the Antichrist spoken of, and Gog and Magog spoken of in the Bible and the Quran, he taught that those quote-unquote enemies of the righteous, end quote, were the peoples of Europe. Ghulam Ahmad also taught that the same group of people in Europe were the jinn. He said that in olden times, ancient times, they had lived separated from civilization in the caves and hillsides. He was the first person to teach those ideas, and he taught them extensively as he traveled in India from the year 1889 until 1908. He also was the teacher of Maulana Muhammad Ali. But the name Ghulam Muhammad is pronounced phonetically identical to the name Ghulam Ahmad. It's the same sound, it's the same syllables, it's the same vowels. It's just spelled differently in our language, English. It's an Urdu name or a Pashto name from India. If you look at what Ghulam Ahmad taught, you'll also see that it corresponds exactly with what the messenger taught, Ghulam Muhammad taught. So both the name Ghulam Muhammad and a major part of the teachings are found in India 50 years prior to the founding of the nation. That's pretty compelling evidence that points directly at India. And the name Ghulam Muhammad is Ghulam Ahmad, the same name, and it's from India.
So you're saying the names are from India. I've heard that W.D. Farad wrote in Arabic and that his penmanship was among the finest in the Arabic world. Did W.D. Farad write in Arabic?
Yeah, there is no evidence of that. If anyone has a sample of W.D. Farad's handwriting in Arabic, they've never permitted the public to see it. If you look at it, any authentic samples of W.D. Farad's handwriting is going to be in English or in Urdu or in one of the other languages of India. And remember, Urdu looks just like Arabic. The difference is that Urdu has 38 letters, while Arabic has only 28 letters. Unless a person can read Arabic or read Urdu, they wouldn't be able to look at them side by side and tell the difference. Written Urdu is very similar to written Arabic, but there isn't any evidence that W.D. Farad wrote in Arabic.
You were saying that all the names W.D. Farad mentions in the problem book are Indian names. But is there anything he taught which can be traced to Arabia? Doesn't W.D. Farad refer to the Holy Quran in the problem book?
In the problem book, yes and no. Yes, he does, but in the problem book, he doesn't refer to it as the Holy Quran. Instead, he calls it the Quran Sharif. And just like the name Usman Sharif, he calls it the Quran Sharif. That's in the problem book at problem number 9. And he calls it that name, Quran Sharif, not just once, but 3 times in a row. It's not accidental, it's significant.
How's that?
It's significant because that name or that title, Quran Sharif, is not the Arabic title for the Quran. The title Quran Sharif is the way people in India refer to the Holy Quran. Those books, the Quran Sharifs, were all from India. You can look it up, research it. Sharif is spelled Sharriiff, just as he spelled it. And you'll see page after page after page, and every one of them are links to Urdu translations of the Holy Quran. This means that all Quran Sharifs are Holy Qurans translated from Arabic into Urdu. That means that the Quran Sharifs are Urdu or Indian translations of the Quran. So in the problem book, yes, W.D. Farad does refer to the Quran, but he does so using its Indian title. If he's from Arabia, why does it refer to the Quran in a way that only people in India do? And keep in mind that both Yusuf Ali and Maulana Muhammad Ali, they were both Indians. They were both born in India. Neither of them were from Arabia. Maulana Muhammad Ali was an Indian. He was an Ahmadiyya, a student of Ghulam Ahmad. And he was born and raised in that same part of India that all of the names come from, Western India. That same part that everything we're going to talk about comes from the same part of India. And the fact that both Yusuf Ali and Maulana Muhammad Ali were Indians, it means that the only translations of the Quran which W.D. Farad are known to have recommended are both translations made by Indians from India. If he's from Arabia, why does he recommend these Qurans from India? And so, in the problem book, W.D. Farad does use that title, Quran Sharif, is the Indian title, and the only translations are from people who were born in India. The only translations he is known to have used or given to other people to use. Even as late as the 1960s, there was a man named Abdul Basit Naim. He was an editor and a writer, author. He advised the Messenger on how to start the paper that he ran. Abdul Basit Naim was an Indian. He was born in India. I'm mentioning him only because if you look at it, you'll find that all of the outside sources and support related to Islam in the nation, in its early years, in its formative years, all of those sources and support come from India. So yes, in the problem book, W.D. Farad refers to the Quran 3 times in a row using its Indian title.
You said that W.D. Farad spoke Urdu or Indian and not Arabic. What about the greeting Assalamu alaikum? That's Arabic, right?
Yes, it is Arabic, and it's also Urdu. But there's a difference in the way that the Arabic Assalamu alaikum is pronounced and the way that the Indian Assalamu alaikum is pronounced. W.D. Farad, he taught the greeting Assalamu alaikum, and the response he taught is Wa alaikum salam. If you listen to that, Assalamu alaikum, do you notice how the lay sound is a little louder in the other parts of the words? Assalamu alaikum. That's the Indian way of pronouncing those words. Research the words Assalamu alaikum and you'll see that in Arabic, the greeting is not pronounced Assalamu alaikum. In Arabic, they say Assalamu alaikum, Assalamu alaikum. There is a mu sound at the end of the word salam, and it's followed by a wa sound. Assalamu alaikum. That is the Arabic way of saying that greeting. But in India, they do say Assalamu alaikum, exactly how he taught it. W.D. Farad taught the Urdu, or the Indian way of pronouncing the greeting. That's why you'll notice Arabic speakers, they always say that the students of W.D. Farad don't know how to say the greeting right. They say that's not correct Arabic. And it's not correct Arabic. It's perfect Urdu. And the response, wa alaikum salam, that's not Arabic either. It's not the correct way of pronouncing Arabic. But it is perfect Urdu. So W.D. Farad taught the greeting using its Indian way of pronouncing it.
Yeah, the Arabs always say, you guys don't say the greeting right. They say the same thing about Farad. They say, brother, it's Fared or Farad. But I know it's Farad.
Yes, but that's only right in India. It's only said that way in India.
Okay, you've pointed out that the names in the greeting point to India. Is there anything else regarding his language?
Yes, W.D. Farad left a sizable amount of written work We've talked a little about the names and the words that he used. There's some other points that are worth looking at regarding how he used English, the English words that he used. As I said earlier, at the time of W.D. Farrad's birth, and really up until 1947, India was part of the British Empire. So W.D. Farrad coming from India means that his English would be that kind of English spoken in India, namely British English. And we would also expect to find that throughout his words that he has written, examples of what's called Indian English. Indian English is that specific type of British English that's used only in India. There are some differences between British English and American English. Some of the grammar, some of the words and phrases which may be appropriate in British English are not appropriate in American English. We know that W.D. Farrad had secretaries, and those secretaries, part of their job was to make certain that his words in the problem book, for instance, their job was to make sure that his words all conform to the standard usage, how we use English, American English. But in his handwritten words, letters, his handwritten letters, those letters definitely would reflect his use of the language. So looking at his handwritten words, letters, does he use American English or does he use the English of India, British English? There is a letter written by W.D. Farrad that's dated December 18th, 1933. On the first page of that letter, W.D. Farrad writes, "You have done minus things. You have done minus things." That right there is British English. In this country, we would say, "You have done some bad things," or possibly, "You have done some negative things," maybe. But no one says, "You have done minus things," unless they're speaking British English. But in the very next sentence, he uses not just British English, he uses Indian English, that form of English that is used only in India. So in the next sentence, W.D. Farrad says, "I have numbers of records of charges against you." That phrase, numbers of records of charges, is Indian English. They talk like that only in India. Wherein here, in this country, we might say, "I have many records of charges against you. I have numerous records of charges against you." But only someone from India, speaking Indian English, would say, "I have numbers of records of charges against you." Why is he speaking Indian English? That's just one example in a long line of examples, all of which show that he came from India. On page 3 of that same letter, W.D. Farrad writes, try to get acquainted and start a station there. Start a station there. In India, a group, a community is called a station. No one else on the face of the planet uses that word station to mean a group except people in India. They call a group, they call it a station. Knowing that W.D. Farrad was from India, and that he spoke a British form of English, you can better understand now why he used some of the other phrases that he used. For example, he used such words as lost found. In this country, no one says lost found. What is a lost found? We don't use that term here. That's British English. Lost found is the title of a book called The Lost Found by William M. Taylor, a British preacher. It's a British term. Lost found means a person who needs saving. And that's a term that he used a lot. Lost found. It's a British term. So we can see, in addition to that, he opened up a school for children, and he called that school a university. In this country, and really everywhere else, universities are institutions of higher learning for adults. They offer degrees, graduate degrees, and postgraduate degrees. That's a university. Schools for children in this country, they're just called schools. The only place in the world where a children's school is called a university is India. W.D. Farad established schools for children, which he called universities. That's strictly Indian English. So in addition to all of the other facts, the evidence is very clear. Linguistic evidence is very clear. W.D. Farad spoke Indian English. And the reason he did so is because he came from India. There's numerous examples throughout his teachings where he talks about trading posts and settlements. That's a reference to the history of the British Empire. The British Empire, the British East India Company, set up trading posts and settlements in India where it competed with the Dutch East India Company in competition for India's spice trade. Before that, you recall when they discovered this country, when they so-called discovered this country, they were coming over in search for a route to India. And they stumbled upon those people who they found here. They're called Indians. They called them Indians because they thought they had discovered a route to India, a shorter route to India. And that's what fueled Europe's age of exploration. Everyone was rushing to set up these posts, these settlements, trading posts in India. During that time, India produced 30% of the world's wealth. And that's why they built the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal was the gateway to India. That's what they called it, the gateway to India. They sailed right past Saudi Arabia. That was considered one of the poorer parts of the planet. So W.D. Farad talks about trading posts and settlements. And in doing so, he's describing in a nutshell the history of the British Empire's presence in India. Everything he said, everything he did, points directly to India. In addition to him using very specific English words that come from India, Indian English, when you look at the style that he wrote, the very style that he used in the problem book, for example, that whole style is specific to India. A brother of mine who lives there in India, he sent me a book. It's called the Bahujan Guide. The Bahujans are known as the 85%. On the back cover of that book, it states a problem. Just listen to what this problem says, and listen to how it says it. It says, 5 or 10 men cannot fell a horse for want of an appropriate technique, but the weakling horseshoe fitter fells it with ease within a minute. The horseshoe fitter has a right technique. Then it says that the Bahujans are 85% of the population. If the Bahujans can mobilize 40% of the Bahujan vote, they will be able to win all of the seats in the state assembly. Why are they failing? What is the way out? Attractive reward for the answer. That style in which that problem is presented is the exact same style W.D. Farad uses throughout the problem. It's undeniable. That same Indian style is used by W.D. Farad in the problem book in problems number 6, 8, 9, 25, 28, 31, 33, and 34. The only place you'll find that style of writing is among people in India. It's the style used when trying to reach the 85%, and it's the same style used by W.D. Farad when he was trying to reach the 85% here. Evidence is overwhelming. W.D. Farad came from India.
That's pretty interesting. But don't the lessons say W.D. Farad came from the holy city of Mecca?
No, they don't. The lessons say W.D. Farad came from the root of civilization. They do not say that W.D. Farad came from anywhere in Arabia. That's not in the lessons at all. He's referred to your brother from the east. He never says he came from Arabia.
Talk about that, because the lessons say the root of civilization is in Mecca, Arabia.
Yeah, the popular view or the popular interpretation is that W.D. Farad came from the holy city of Mecca in Arabia. The fact is that throughout all of the lessons and throughout all of his other writing, he never mentions Mecca, and he never mentions Saudi Arabia. That's not accidental. He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew exactly what he was saying. The only mention of Mecca, the only mention of Arabia, appear in the answers that are given to two of the questions. And those answers are the answers given by the messenger. And W.D. Farad wrote that those answers are very near correct.
So are you saying that the messenger's answers are wrong?
No, I agree with him. I'm saying that the answers are very near correct.
Oh, okay.
Now, regarding Mecca and Arabia, based on what W.D. Farad says in the problem book, we say he came to North America from the east or from the root of civilization. But in the answers, when we study them, we see that wherever Mecca, Arabia is mentioned, the description given does not fit Arabia. Instead, it describes India. Here's an important key point. Every place in the records, every place in the lessons where the messenger refers to Mecca, Arabia, his written description does not fit Arabia. It describes India. For example, in lesson number 1, the answer says, which we agree is very near correct, it says that Mecca, Arabia is, quote, Arabia is in the far east and is bordered by the Indian Ocean on the south. That's what the lesson says. The problem is that Mecca, Arabia, is not in the far east, and it's not bordered by the Indian Ocean on the south. It's in the Middle East, and it's bordered kind of to the southeast by the Indian Ocean. But it is not in the Far East, and it's not bordered by the Indian Ocean on the south. That's why they call it the Indian Ocean. The only place that fits that description, the only place in the Far East bordered by the Indian Ocean on the south is India. And that's why they call it the Indian Ocean. It borders India on the south. Arabia is nowhere near the Far East. If it's talking about Arabia, then the answer is not very near correct. It's very much wrong. The only way it can be very near correct is if it's talking about India.
So how can Mecca be in India?
Well, look at the name Mecca. Everybody already knows about the city of Mecca on the Arabian Peninsula. But ancient India was in ancient times known by a name very similar to Mecca. It's called the Indus Valley Civilization. That civilization, which the lessons correctly call the root of civilization in Asia, is located in the western part of India. The exact same place of India where all the names come from. Usman, Shah, all of the names come from. Everything else comes from the same part of India. In ancient times, the Indus Valley civilization was known as Mleccha, M-L-E-C-C-H-A. Mleccha, you can hear the name in there, Mecca in there. Mleccha is the modern way of pronouncing. It's the more Aryanized or Indo-European way of pronouncing a very old name. The people of that civilization in ancient India, they called their civilization Mleccha. The people who lived near them, they called that part of India Mleccha. Archaeologists tell us that even as far away as Sumer, it was known as Mleccha. India was called Mleccha.
So you're saying that Mleccha was one of the original names of the root of civilization on the continent of Asia?
Yes, that's what they call it. So the Indus Valley Civilization is a part of India. It's bordered by the Indian Ocean of the south. History and archaeologists tell us that India at that time was called by that name, Mleccha. It's a very old civilization. It's over 4,000 years old. In fact, some people trace it back to 9,000 years old. It was a very vast civilization. They had sciences and arts. They grew different crops, cotton. They mined gold. They had a sewage system that ran under the ground. It was the first of its type anywhere in the world. They built huge cities, multi-level homes. It was a very grand civilization. W.D. Farad said that when those who came into that part of the world, into the root of civilization, and upset it, disrupted it, he said that they came from Pelan and entered into the root of civilization. History shows that when people moved into that part of the world, Indo-Europeans migrated into that part of the world. A tribe known as the Aryans moved into that part of the world. They came down from the hills and they attacked the Indus Valley Civilization. The path that they took, the route that they took, was through modern-day Afghanistan and through an area that's known as Pelan Kali. So this original group of civilization in Asia fell after people coming from Pelan entered into it. That's talking about India. So after those invasions and during the so-called Vedic age, the invaders who came down and conquered India, they took that name Mleccha and turned it into a derogatory term. They enslaved the people of that civilization, put them into a social system based on skin color. It's called Varna or caste. And they labeled them as uncivilized, outcasts, non-Vedics. And eventually that name Mecca or Mleccha was used in the Sanskrit language, and it was used to describe anyone who did not speak Sanskrit and who did not believe in the gods of the Indo-Europeans or any other aspect of their system. And this was after many, many battles between those who moved into India and what they called the Krishnas, which means blacks. As the Rig Vedas describe, eventually the people there in India, Mleccha, there in India, they were subdued or conquered, they were crushed, reduced to a broken state. It was only after they had been slaughtered, enslaved, and denigrated, and forced away from the centers of power and the civilization that they had built that they were then broken and they were called by that name, Mleccha. So you can see that the root of civilization, which W.D. Farad describes, is India. You can just look at the student enrollment at question number 3. In the answer, W.D. Farad gave, he says that the population of the original nation in the wilderness of North America is 17 million, with the 2 million Indians makes it 19 million. Remember, W.D. Farad taught that the native people of this country, or Indians, migrated to North America after having been exiled from the root of civilization in India. Again, he names India. If he were saying that the root of civilization was in Saudi Arabia, then he would have said they were exiled from Saudi Arabia. But he says that they came from India. India is the only root of civilization he ever identifies.
Wow. So we have two Meccas.
Yes, we have the two Meccas. One Mecca on the Arabian Peninsula, which is not in the Far East, and which is not bordered by the Indian Ocean on the south, and the other Mecca, the old ancient Mecca, Mecca, in India, which is in the Far East and is bordered by the Indian Ocean on the south. So we can ask the question, which of these two Meccas is the root of civilization in Asia? Which is the root and which is the branch? Archaeologists will tell us that the Indus Valley civilization of India is at least 9,000 years old. That's a very old civilization. Its antiquity is well established. It was founded by, it existed at the same time as, and was part and parcel of the ancient civilization of Kemet, Egypt. It was also connected with the ancient civilization in Sumer. They were all three really just one civilization, and they were all built by the same group of people. So the civilization there in India, the Indus Valley civilization, is very old, it's very ancient. It's among the earliest of the historically verifiable civilizations in the world. As to the city of Mecca in Arabia, archaeologists and historians tell us that Mecca is less than 2,000 years old. In other words, there is no historical evidence and no archaeological evidence that Mecca, Arabia, even existed until 4 centuries after the Christian era. That means that Mecca, Arabia is not an ancient city at all. Historically and archaeologically, it wasn't even founded until after the start of the medieval period. That's pretty new. You can research that. You can try and find any evidence. Just look for any evidence that that city, Mecca, Arabia, existed prior to the 4th century AD. You can Google the words. Just Google ancient towns of Arabia, and you'll see for yourself that Mecca in Arabia does not appear on any ancient map. Why not? You can search for the word Mecca, M-E-C-C-A, or search for the word Baka, which is its name, oldest name. Baka is B-A-K-K-A. And you won't find it on any ancient map. And the reason Mecca, Arabia does not show up on any of the maps of the ancient world is because it wasn't there. It's not an ancient city. Ask yourself this question. If Mecca, Arabia existed in ancient times, why didn't the people of Egypt or Kemet, who lived right next to it, why didn't they know anything about it? How is it that the Sumerians, they didn't know anything about it? They knew about the Mecca in India. Why didn't they know about the Mecca in Arabia? Or the Babylonians, the Assyrians, they didn't know anything about it. Why? More importantly, how about the people of Arabia itself? If Mecca existed, how is it that they themselves did not know anything about it? They didn't know about it because it wasn't there.
There's no historical record of it, and it doesn't appear on any ancient map?
Right. And there's been many kingdoms throughout the history of ancient Arabia, literate kingdoms. Those kingdoms left thousands of inscriptions. And out of those thousands of inscriptions, not a single one mentions Mecca. If Mecca, Arabia existed in the ancient world, wouldn't at least one person in at least one kingdom in all of Arabia have known about it, known something about it. Yet there is no evidence and no record of its existence. Not even in the writings of the Greeks or the Romans. They were all over that area. How can anyone claim that Mecca, Arabia is the root of civilization and no one ever even knew that it was there? Religious reasons, for reasons of faith, a person can choose to say that. They can choose to believe in that. But from a scientific, evidentiary-based perspective, it's simply unreasonable to introduce a city like Mecca, Arabia, and claim that it has the longest life of any city in the world, and yet there's absolutely no record of it. The root of civilization in the part of the world which is described in the lessons as being in the Far East and bordered on the south by the Indian Ocean is India.
Okay. So that's talking about the historical evidence. Is there any other evidence inside of the lessons themselves besides the saying it's located in the Far East and it's bordered by the Indian Ocean on the south, which indicate that the root of civilization is in India?
Yes, in lesson number 1, question 4, answer 4 rather, it says that the distance between the root of civilization and the Caucasus Mountains equals a distance of 2,200 miles, where it says that they walked from the root of civilization up to the hills and caves. Mecca, Arabia, is less than 1,500 miles from the Caucasus. So again, according to the lessons, as it is described, Saudi Arabia, Mecca, and Saudi Arabia is excluded. It's less than 1,500 miles away. But the distance between the Indus Valley civilization of India and the Caucasus Mountains equals 2,200 miles, the exact distance described in the lessons.
So the distance from India to the Caucasus Mountains matches up with what the lessons say. India is 2,200 miles away. But how do we know that's the same path that they took?
You're asking how can we verify that we're measuring the correct route?
Right.
W.D. Farad tells us how to measure the route in the history of General Mukmuk.
Okay, General Mukmuk. A lot of people don't know anything about General Mukmuk. And for those who don't know, can you talk about that?
Okay, and it's true that many of the students or those who study what he wrote, they've never even heard of General Mukmuk nowadays. It used to be very well known up until the 1970s, then it became very, now no one knows about it. W. Farad said that when those who were expelled from the root of civilization were driven into the hills of West Asia, the person in charge, or the man in charge of their expulsion, was General Mukmuk. He said that General Mukmuk first drove the troublemakers westward before heading northward. He said it was 2,200 miles and they walked every step of the way. You can see that in lesson 1, question 4, like I said. He further said that at the halfway point between the root of civilization and the hills, at a distance of 1,100 miles, General Mukmuk let them stop and rest at an oasis. An oasis is a fertile or green spot in the midst of a desert or a wasteland. The first thing to point out is that according to the history of General Mukmuk, as it's been taught, the root of civilization from which they were driven, again, cannot be Mecca, Arabia, because Mecca, Arabia is located right up near to the western shoreline of the Arabian Peninsula. It's up on the sea. The Red Sea is right there. So traveling westward from Arabia, they would have had to have crossed water. They would have had to go across water. And if they crossed water, it meant they either swam or they used boats. The lessons say they walked every step of the way. So unless someone claims that they walked on water, then the route they traveled could not have been from Mecca, Arabia. Starting from India, however, and traveling from the Indus Valley region up to the Caucasus, they absolutely would have to begin by traveling westward. And the route from India fits that perfectly. Even the oasis, which W.D. Farad describes as being 1,100 miles away, starting in India, traveling westward, just like he said, then bearing northwestward, traveling halfway, 1,100 miles, there's all this harsh terrain. It's a desert, just as it's described. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, in the middle of all of this desolation, we see the oasis. It's striking, it's clear, it's unmistakable, and it can be proven in no limit of time. And when we measure the distance from the Indus Valley up to that oasis, which we can still see there today, it's very large, we find that it's 1,100 miles, exactly half of the 2,200 mile distance, exactly as W.D. Farad describes it. The fact demonstrates that the route measured from the root of civilization, which is in the Far East, which is bordered by the Indian Ocean on the south, and which is 2,200 miles away from the Caucasus, and which has a oasis, and the oasis is located at the halfway point of 1,100 miles, accurately describes nowhere else on the face of the planet except India. That's half a dozen independent variables, each of which corresponds with all of the others, and all of them pointing directly to India. All of the evidence is mathematically verifiable. W.D. Farad traveled 9,000 miles to North America from the root of civilization, which he describes not as Arabia, but as India.
Wow. I think we all have a little bit to think about after you shared all of this wonderful information.
And that name, General Muhammad, it's a very unique sounding name. And as you probably know, Muhammad is not Arabic. In fact, even the name Muhammad is from India. It's from that same part of India that all of the other names are from. Muhammad is a concatenated name. That's when you join your the name of your father and the name of your mother. You put those two names together. So if your father's name is Makkah, your mother's name is Makkah, your name becomes Muhammad. And that type of name is common in India. In Urdu, that language in India, Muhammad means the clenched fist. It's the name of a soldier, military name. W.D. Farad described General Muhammad using an Indian name, which happens to be the perfect name for the type of person that he's described as being, a stern, unyielding soldier, a clenched fist. So all of the evidence relates to W.D. Farad's teachings, and it all points directly to India. Do you remember a little earlier I mentioned that W.D. Farad traveled 9,000 miles from the root of civilization to North America?
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you could talk about that.
Well, in the lessons, he tells us again how we are to measure that distance, and if we use how he said to measure that distance, we'll see that takes us again directly to India.
Yeah, explain that.
Okay. In English lesson number C1, line number 32, it says, well, they wanted to go to their own country, but they could not swim 9,000 miles.
Right.
Swimming is done across water, not across any land. So the distance between America and the root of civilization is a distance of 9,000 miles by water. When we measure the distance by water between America and Mecca, Arabia, we find that the distance does not equal 9,000 miles. So once again, Mecca, Arabia is excluded. It cannot be the root of civilization described in English lesson number C1. On the other hand, when we measure the distance from North America to the Indus Valley region of India, from the eastern seaboard of the United States, across the Atlantic Ocean, through the Mediterranean Sea, down the Suez Canal, and around the Arabian Sea, we find that the distance by water between America and the Indus Valley region of India equals 9,000 miles, exactly as explained in the lesson. Now we have triangulated the exact geographic location of the country, which the lessons refer to as the root of civilization. This means that no other place, location on the face of the planet Earth is both 2,200 miles by land from the Caucasus Mountains and at the same time 9,000 miles by water from North America. No other location on the face of the planet Earth fits this description other than India. English lesson number C1 ends with the words, after accomplishing this lesson, lesson number C1, at once ask for lesson number C2. Why does it say after accomplishing this lesson? Well, he tells us what needs to be accomplished in line number 32, where it says, well, they wanted to go to their own country, but they could not swim 9,000 miles. That had yet to be accomplished. Nowadays, we're able to measure that distance by water between America and the root of civilization, and are able to swim in a figurative sense that distance of 9,000 miles.
All right, now that's a lot to think about. Other than the names, the places, the pronunciations, the history, the vocabulary, the grammar, and the geographic measurements, what other things show that W.D. Farrar came from India? Because in the videos you did 5 years ago, you talked about how Jainism from India talks about the 24 scientists. The 24 scientists and Jainism, that's in India, right?
Yeah, Jainism is really rooted in the old Indus Valley civilization. A lot of people trace Jainism to a man named Mahavira, but really it goes back beyond that to the old ancient Indus Valley science. We don't have time to go into it today in detail, but Jainism is essentially the same thing as Buddhism. It's just got a few different things added to it. Both Buddha and Mahavira lived in India during the same time. In the Jain literature, the 24 scientists or leaders who rule over the world are referred to as the 24 Tirthankaras. They are the 24 scientists. There's 24 of them. The word Tirthankara means a ford maker. A ford is a place in the river where it's made shallow so that people can walk across it. These Tirthankaras, or scientists, are said to make their presence known at specific periods throughout history. And they influence the flow of history, or the flow of the river, to effectuate circumstances in ways that help societies and groups of people cross over or advance from one stage of development to the next. That's the job of the 24 scientists. That's why they release their books. That's why they do what they do at these predetermined points in time. So Tirthankara means a ford maker. And you know, Ford was one of the names used by W.D. Farrar. He was doing the work of a Tirthankara, a scientist. He didn't just rock the boat. His job was to alter the course of the river. And that's one reason why the people of his day, authorities of his day, they challenged him for that. They disliked him for that, because they knew that what he was talking about meant that their time had expired. So, yeah, Jainism is from India. There in India, they talk about the 24 scientists. They don't have any record of that in Saudi Arabia. The records all point to India.
W.D. Farad talked about the 25,000-year history or cycle of time. Is that also mentioned in the ancient books of India?
Yeah, you can find the 25,000-year history discussed in a book called the Manu Smriti, or the Laws of Manu. When you look at the history which W.D. Farad outlined, in addition to the 25,000-year cycles, he speaks of periods of time so huge, so vast, that no culture in the world talks in terms of such huge numbers except India. Western science says that the whole universe is no older than 14 billion years. W.D. Farad talked about history in terms of trillions of years. No one else does that. No one else talks of history in terms of trillions of years except in India. You can look up the word Yuga, Y-U-G-A. In India, they talk about history going back 311 trillion years. When W.D. Farad talks about an event occurring 66 trillion years ago, that is not in conformity with any other historical framework except for the framework in India. So again, his language regarding trillions of years, that points only to India.
You were saying that the 24 sciences are talked about in India, in Jainism. Jainism is different from Hinduism, right? What did W.D. Farad say about Hinduism?
W.D. Farad definitely, most definitely, was not a proponent of Hinduism. In fact, it's reported that he said, if you see a Christian and a Hindu walking down the street, kill the Hindu first.
Yeah, I remember that.
Like you know, he wasn't really advocating any kind of physical harm against Christians or anyone else, Hindus or anyone else. He was talking in terms of ideology. He often talked very hard on the Christian preachers of that time, but the gist of what he was saying to his students was, as much as you have endured segregation and centuries of slavery at the hands of Christians in this country, you should know about, become aware of what your people in Asia, in India, have suffered and are suffering under the Hindu system, the Hindu Varna system, caste system. Remember, Hinduism comes from India. He wanted his students to see that their condition at that time was just one part of a global system, a global pattern of racism, of casteism, of inequality, of exclusion. And to do that, he spoke specifically of India, of Hinduism. He said, if you see a Christian and a Hindu walking down the street, kill the Hindu first. Where does that saying come from? Mecca, Arabia? No, it comes from India. It's a popular saying among the oppressed people in India, the so-called outcasts in India. They say, if you see a Brahmin and a snake, kill the Brahmin first. That is an Indian saying. Here's why they say that. Hinduism is based on the caste system, and the Brahmin caste is the so-called highest of the castes. The Brahmins make all of the laws, religious laws, and they rule over the so-called lower castes. Brahmins are 10% of the population, but they rule over the 85%. And the 85% are those who believe in the Brahmin teachings of their God, mystery God. And according to the Hindu books, such as the Laws of Manu, the 85% are born only for the purpose of serving the Brahmins. Hinduism in India teaches that if you serve a Brahmin, then after you die, you'll be reincarnated or reborn into a higher caste. And if you keep serving and you smile while you're doing it, eventually you may even be reborn as a Brahmin yourself. And it's been that way for the past 4,000 years, ever since the time Musa. But the saying that W.D. Farad was quoting from, it comes from India. And to show and prove that, just read the article in the Wall Street Journal in December of 2007. The Wall Street Journal quoted the popular Indian saying, if you see a Brahmin and a snake, kill the Brahmin first. Everything that W.D. Farad said and did points directly to India. We can see that he came from India when we look at some of the other things that he taught. There's much, much, much more. For example, if you take the first and the second question in student enrollment.
Yeah, you talked about that in your earlier videos.
Yeah, that was, I talked about how the answers to question 1 and question 2 relates to Buddhism. And in part 2 of this series, I'd like to talk about how W.D. Farad taught Buddhism, because he taught Buddhism. But today, I want to stick to just that question that did he come from India?
Okay.
There's a few things intrinsic to the questions, not the answers, but the questions themselves, which relate directly to India. For example, if you look at the first question in student enrollment, who is the original man? Most people would have asked who was the first man, but W.D. Farad asked, who is the original man? Notice that the question isn't a past tense question. It is present tense. Who is? And why would he say original instead of first? No one else had ever asked that question in that way, at least not over here. In India, during the 30s, and even until today, the question of who is the original man is an actual topic of debate. In India, during the time of W.D. Farad, during the time when he was teaching, they had just started excavating the ruins of the ancient Indus Valley civilization. And the newspapers and the scientific journals at that time, worldwide, were abuzz with the breaking news of these newly uncovered cities, mega cities, Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, and other cities. These huge cities were being uncovered there in India, ancient cities. And the Brahmin caste, who descended from the Aryans who invaded India, the Brahmins were claiming it was them, it was their ancestors who were the fathers of that early civilization, the root of civilization in Asia. On the other hand, the so-called lower castes, the slaves, outcasts, who are not Hindus at all, they're primarily Buddhists. They were saying, no, our ancestors fathered those ancient cities. In India, the originals are called Adivasis. Adivasi is spelled Adivas. Adivasi means the original man. So the question, who is the original man? That question by itself, and the precision and the specificity of the language which W.D. Farad used, is traceable to nowhere else except India.
Okay.
And to see that in unmistakably clear terms, he follows that question with a second question. W.D. Farad then asked, who is the colored man? Now, notice how the answer which W.D. Farad gave was the exact opposite of what everyone else in this country believed at that time. Remember, Indian society is structured around a caste system. In Sanskrit, the word for caste is varna. Varna means a color. Varna means color. When caste was first set up, soon after 2000 BC, a person's caste, or varna, was determined by their skin color. Hinduism divided people into 4 varnas, or castes, or colors. And today there are 4 varnas, or colors, and those colors are white, red, brown or yellow, and lastly black. So the caste system of India is the world's first historically verifiable social hierarchy based on skin color. It was set up so that one race could rule over and dominate another so-called race. Under the caste system, Indo-Europeans who moved into India, the Brahmins were the divine caste. Under the rules of caste, called Varna Smriti, any word uttered by a Brahmin is to be heard and obeyed as the actual word of God. So the Brahmin, or the so-called top caste, is a color that's associated with that caste. The color is white. In that early system, if your Varna, or your skin color, was a little darker, your caste was a little lower, and your caste color was red, and it still is that today. And your job, if you were born into that group, into that caste, your job was to enforce the laws. You were a soldier, a secular administrator, and your job was to protect the Brahmins. Further down, if your Varna, or your skin color, was brown, you were a merchant. And the merchants of that time mostly were farmers. They produced and sold food. And their job was to feed the Brahmins. At the very bottom of the caste system, if your skin was black, or your Varna is black, your job was to be a slave. And that's how the caste system, or the 4 colors, or the Varnas, got started. The caste system is a system of birth control. Intermarriage between people of different skin colors, or different Varnas, was and still is strictly forbidden. If you notice, it's the same as Yaqub's laws, and caste is still practiced in India today. Of course, over the past 4,000 years or so, there's been a lot of exchange, mixture, genetic mixture, between the 4 groups, the 4 Varnas, so that today it's very difficult to discern a person's caste simply by looking at them. You just can't tell the difference because there's been so much mixture. But the system of caste, Hindu caste system, is still practiced there in India today. And anyone who abides by the rules of caste is called Suvarna. Suvarna is S-U-V-A-R-N-A. Sometimes it's spelled S-A-V-A-R-N-A. Suvarna means having color. Anyone who lives according to the laws of caste is called Suvarna, a colored man. Suvarna. That's what the word means. Su actually means golden, or wheat colored. If you look in the books, Rig Veda, for example, the Rig Vedas, Indo-Europeans, peoples who moved into India, often describe themselves as being Suvarna, wheat colored. It's the same thing. It's just like the term golden hair, and Su or Sa means the same thing, golden, wheat colored, or blonde. The people there, Adivasis, who fought against the caste system, or the race-based system in India, that's the whole story of the Rig Vedas. The Rig Vedas are the earliest of the Hindu books, holy books, and it is essentially a record of the battles waged between the invaders and those Adivasis, original man, who refused to acquiesce to the Hindu race-based system, or a system based on race. Under Buddhism, caste was outlawed. Buddhism outlaws slavery of all types, any type rather. And the Brahmins, they did not like that because it meant that they had to go out of power. So when they came back into power, the Brahmins took the Adivasis and anyone else who practiced Buddhism and threw them out of the caste system. And that's where we get the word nowadays, outcast. That's where that comes from. They were cast out of the caste system. Outcasts are called the Dalits. And the Dalits are said to be Avarna. Avarna means having no color. So they're outside of the caste system. And they were originally the Buddhists who rejected Yakub's laws, or the laws of caste. It's really critical that at some point we talk more in depth about the Dalit movement in India, and in the future we'd like to do a few talks focusing solely on the importance of knowing about, recognizing, and supporting the Dalit movement in India.
You mentioned Yakub's laws. Could you go into that?
If you look at the laws of caste, it's the same as what W.D. Farad taught as Yakub's laws. Under Yakub's laws, intermarriage between different skin colors was forbidden. That is the fundamental law at the root of the Hindu caste system. That's why he said if you see a Christian and a Hindu walking down the street, kill the Hindu first, because he was objecting to that law of Varna. Yakub's laws are identical to what's called the laws of Manu. It's a book that you can read called Manu Smriti, spelled M-A-N-U-S-M-R-I-T-I. In India, they call Yakub Manu. All of what I'm talking about is just evidence indicating that every aspect, everything that W.D. Farad taught is traceable to India. Not a thing he taught is not traceable to India. It's not difficult to see that he came from India.
You were talking about the Hindu four-part division of society, and that was originally based on skin color or Yakub's laws.
Yes, caste was originally based on skin color, but in ancient India, before the caste system was set up, going back to the earliest times, they have always traditionally had a four-part way of organizing their society. It just wasn't based on skin color. The Aryans adopted that four-part division of a society, agrarian system. They took that system and superimposed on it skin color. And that even shows another connection between what's taught by W.D. Farad in India. If you take the traditional four-part structure of society in India and compare it with the society or the nation he founded of the Lost Founds, he laid it out in such a way that it absolutely mirrors India's four-part system. In modern times, the system there in India is represented by the priests, the military, the merchants, and the laborers. Now compare that with what W.D. Farad set up. The priests are called the ministers. The military are called the FOI. The merchants are called the merchants, those who open their own businesses, for example. And the laborers are called the laborers. It's exactly the same. Now, let's just take one part of the society he set up. Take the military, for instance, FOI. FOI uses British drill commands, and specifically, the FOI uses Indian drill commands. All English-speaking countries, the command given to execute a salute is present arms. That's in all English-speaking countries. The FOI says original salute. Everywhere else, they say present arms, everywhere except India. In India, and only in India, the command to execute a salute is general salute. W.D. Farad used the Indian command of General Salute, and it became Original Salute. That's an Indian drill command. So the FOI uses a command unlike any other military command used anywhere else in the world except India. It's not accidental. It's just another unique part of what he set up. On the topic of that FOI, a number of years ago, I was at some function. It was an indoor function, and there was a gentleman seated near us, and I noticed he was sitting in that trademark FOI style with his left hand on his left thigh and his right hand covering his left hand. No one else sits like that unless they're FOI. So I spoke with him, and I even greeted him. I said, "Assalamu alaikum," and he responded, "Wa alaikum salam." So we struck up a conversation, and I asked him, "Where did you learn how to sit like that?" And he told me he was from Pakistan, and that sitting posture, that sitting position, is the way men in his region of Pakistan are taught to sit. Pakistan is the same western part of British India that we've been talking about. It's the same part that all the names and everything else comes from. So in addition to the FOI drill commands and the way that he structured the nation and the names and the history and the distances, in addition to all of that, even the FOI sitting posture is uniquely Indian. W.D. Farad came from India. They said that he danced with while he was balancing a glass of water on his head. That's a popular dance in West India. That dance comes from India.
You talked about the 9,000 miles by water mentioned in the English lesson number C1, and I think that's pretty compelling all by itself. If W.D. Farad came from India, why would he allow people to think he came from Arabia?
Because that perception was necessary. If you remember, they say that W.D. Farad was in and out of America for 20 years prior to July 1930.
Okay.
Well, 20 years prior means he had been in and out of America since 1910.
Right. I could see that.
It's also said that he attended school in California. Early sources say he attended USC. Later sources I've heard say that he attended UCLA, both in the same city. So he first came in 1910. Now think about the public opinion, the public view as it regarded nationality in America between 1910 and 1934. In 1910, the same time that he is said to have begun coming, or first started coming in and out of this country, in 1910 there was a huge migration of Indians from India into California. And it was at that time that California passed the Indian Exclusion Act. It was designed to keep Indians out of the country. They said any male from India who didn't meet the U.S. Army's physical entrance requirements had to be deported. The law was designed to get Indians out of the country. The physical requirements were that a man from India could be no less than 5 feet 7 inches in height and no less than 140 pounds in weight. W.D. Farad did not fit those physical requirements. He was 5 feet 6 inches tall and his weight was 127 pounds. So not only did he not weigh enough, he was an inch too short. So realistically, if he had advertised the fact that he was from India, he would have been subject to immediate deportation. He would have been sent out of the country. Indians were very much hated in America during that time, at that period of time, and even up until World War II. Indians were considered part of the Yellow Peril, the Asiatic threat, as the newspapers of that time referred to it. If you look at the sources, old sources, newspapers, they're all talking about how can we get rid of these Indians. Now, at the same time, people from Arabia were welcomed with open arms in this country. Americans saw Arabians as allies. So there were things about W.D. Furad's Indian nationality about which, if he openly spoke or openly shared, he would have been subject to immediate deportation. Many Indians were deported, and they kept returning, just like today America's problem, immigration problem, so-called problem, revolves around people from Mexico and Central America and South America. They say that they keep deporting them, but they keep returning. W.D. Furad and many Indians had been coming in and out of the country all that time. If he had come from Arabia, he could have stayed, but coming from India, it described his movements perfectly. His coming in and out of America for 20 years. That describes it perfectly.
Now, is there any other evidence that you would like to talk about which demonstrates that W.D. Furad came from India?
Yes, there's one more last point, and then we can stop with that. And this final point is, I think, a major point.
Okay, then.
W.D. Furad's father was named Afonso. Afonso is an Indian name. Afonso means the light of compassion. Now, regarding W.D. Furad's mother, the messenger is reported to have said that one day we would see her. Relative to this issue that we're talking about today, I propose that we see her right here and right now. And here's what I mean by that. When W.D. Furad was asked by his students what was his mother's name, W.D. Furad told us to call his mother Baby G. Now, throughout the lessons, W.D. Furad always refers to his students as his uncle. He does that 18 times in the problem book and twice in English lesson number C1. Now, if we are his uncle, that makes us his father's brother.
Right.
And being his father's brother, by what name do we properly call his mother? In India, if a man calls you his uncle, you are expected to call that man's mother your sister-in-law. Your brother's wife is your sister-in-law.
That's right.
W.D. Furad's mother, then, is our sister-in-law. And that's exactly what the name Baby G means. Baby G means my honorable sister-in-law in Urdu. Baby G means my honorable sister-in-law all over India, in practically all of the languages of India. In India, when a man calls you his uncle, the proper name to call his mother is Baby G. W.D. Furad addressed us with reverence, with respect, by calling us his uncle, and he asked that we speak of his mother with equal reverence and with equal respect by calling her Baby G, an Indian name. We now can see Baby G clearer, and in doing so we're able to see W.D. Furad with more clarity. The fact that W.D. Furad comes from India doesn't take anything away from him. It only takes away our ignorance of him. The evidence is beyond dispute, beyond any question. W.D. Furad, when you add up and look at all of the facts, W.D. Furad came from India.
Now that was a bomb. That is what you call a bunker buster. Is there anything else? Because at this time, I'd like to give you the last word.
Okay, first, I'd like to thank you, Brother Rock, for taking time out to speak with me today, and I'd like to close on this point. The book we've been waiting for, the book we've been promised, The book written by W.D. Farad has been in our hands all the time. We've been looking at it, but we just haven't seen it. And lastly, to those who may be viewing this, if you feel that anything that we've said here today has helped to increase your understanding, I invite you to study with us. Also, feel free to contact us regarding any questions or comments you might have regarding this topic or any of the future topics that we're going to be talking about. So, thank you for your time.